Hello and welcome to Paul on Politics. On this show we'll be discussing whether the government is heading for trouble over business rates, as many in Kent claim they are facing eye-watering increases that will put them out of business rather than in business. With a growing revolt among shops, offices and many small businesses about the higher bills they're facing, will the Chancellor use next week's budget to head off the growing number of complaints? And just why is the government dragging its feet over the third Thames crossing? We'll also be exploring the forthcoming county council elections and the tussle for political power at County Hall. Will the Conservatives tighten their grip after coming within a whisker of losing outright control 4 years ago? Or can the Liberal Democrats exploit the internal battles going on in the other parties to stage a recovery after they were decimated in 2013? With me on the sofa to discuss these issues are Jeremy Kite, the Conservative leader of Dartford Council, and Rob Bird, Liberal Democrat County Councillor from Maidstone. Thanks to both of them for joining us. But first, Boglarka Kostolani hears from one business in Maidstone that fears for the worst if its business rate bill increases.
This happy little girl just had her first riding lesson at Coldblow Farm in Maidstone. The 20-year-old family business includes a riding school and a range of holiday accommodation, some of which are also designed for disabled people. But the business is facing difficulties because of the government's revaluation of business rates. The rateable valuation for the riding school has gone up by more than 58%, while the one for the cottages and bunkhouse has increased from £15,000 to more than £40,000, which is an increase of 172%. As a result, they started dismantling some of their stables, because they can simply not afford to pay the new rates.
I'm also looking at demolishing one of my holiday buildings, a bunkhouse which has been in use since the war. It was actually used in the war as bunk bed accommodation for the Home Guard, the Dad's Army farm workers and teenagers who were here to support the war effort, because we're very close to Detling Airfield. And that to me is absolutely heartbreaking, that we've got to consider demolishing buildings because of the business rate. Something is terribly wrong with the system.
From April, the amount that businesses have to pay in rates will change to reflect the revaluation of premises that has been carried out by the government last year. More than 500,000 ratepayers will see their bills increase, while 920,000 will see theirs fall. However, it is true that small businesses could be hit harder than others.
We also, though, want to support businesses and recognise that for some business rates will go up when these revaluations take place. That's why we've put significant funding in place for transitional relief. But I recognise that there has been particular concern that there will be some small businesses that are particularly adversely affected by the result of this revaluation. And that's why I've asked the Chancellor and the Communities Secretary to make sure there's appropriate relief in those hardest cases.
However, a research carried out by the Federation of Small Businesses found that more than a third of small firms expect to see their business rates increase. Alison Palmer from FSB says that the new rates will particularly hit businesses in Kent.
This business rate re-evaluation is going to have a dramatic and detrimental effect on loads of businesses across the South East, and in Kent in particular. Small businesses could see their business rates rise by anything between 10 and 50% overnight. Now, this is because of the government's revaluation, which hasn't happened for 7 years. The whole system is outmoded, it's ineffectual, and it's really unfair for small businesses. We need government to rethink the whole system in its entirety.
The government is expected to take action to reduce the impact of the revaluation in next week's budget. This is Boglarka Kostolani reporting for KMTV.
Now, Jeremy Kite, it can't be right that global conglomerates like Amazon and ASOS get a cut in their business rates and the independent high street trader sees an increase. An own goal by your government.
Well, I think there's lots of things wrong with business rates, and I think one of the big issues is this big gap between revaluations. An awful lot can happen in the economy in 7 years, and I think that's what's going to hit people. The one bit of comfort I have, though, is I think the Prime Minister is quite unusually to sort of trail something that's in the budget. Normally, governments won't normally talk about what they're going to do. Well, not officially, but I think at the last PMQs she said very clearly, you know, wait and see, wait and see.
Well, that's,
I think
that's an admission that something's gone wrong, isn't it?
Well, it's an admission that there's a system which has been there a long, long time, which has to be followed, and that actually it has some unintended consequences. I mean, business rates weren't invented by any particular modern party. They've been a long time, and we do need to have business rates paid. They're part of the revenue for the Exchequer. They keep the country rolling. But I think there is an understanding that actually it might be getting the businesses that you really want to be encouraging.
Well, you can't call Amazon a jam. They're just about managing type of.
No, but they are a major contributor to society and the economy, and neither can you actually penalise a firm for being very efficient and having one or two big headquarters rather than lots of small ones. And so the business rates have to be fair. But I've got a feeling that there probably will be an announcement.
Have you been inundated with complaints from businesses about this?
The honest answer is I haven't. Dartford is one of those communities which actually looks to be a winner. Actually, I mean, don't forget there's an assumption that's made when you hear the opposition talking that it's every business is going to be paying more. In fact, there are far more businesses that are going to be paying less, and I think Dartford has actually got a higher proportion of those. So I'm not getting lots of complaints about it, but I think the revaluation needs to be worked out. We shouldn't be waiting 7 years because it creates this kind of toxic shock when it comes. We should really be doing much more graduated work. And I'm pleased there's a fund in there. There seems to be a fund in place. They appear to be looking at some transitional arrangements.
Yes, that fund, though, is a cushioning fund, which some say will not really touch the scale of the increases that they're facing.
Well, I think you have to wait and see what the budget will say. I mean, it may well be that, let's imagine we're sitting here in a week's time and the budget has actually said, well, look, what we're going to do is we're going to immunise a lot of those smaller businesses. We are going to rebalance a little bit. I don't know what it's going to say, but it is, I think it's an indication that once the Prime Minister starts to say something on her feet, that actually there's going to be a change. Wait and see. There probably is going to be a change.
Rob Bird, what's the Liberal Democrat solution?
Well, the transition fund is welcome. But we've always seen in the past that it is how these are administered that really matters, and I am sure that we will see cases in the future of hardship where people think that they have a right to the transition fund and are not getting it, others maybe not applying who should be applying. But I'm going to come back to a point that Jeremy made earlier. Business rates, are they really fit for purpose? Because, you know, the economy and society has moved on enormously.
So what would be your alternative model then if you did away with the current system?
Well, the Liberal Democrats have always advocated some form of local income tax, be that for a personal level, and I think it works better at business level. You know, if you go back something like 30 odd years and you look at a firm doing graphic design, they would have had a large office with 30 large desks with draftsmen working really hard over their desks and paid a large amount of business rates. Now, a similar size firm with 30 employees would have a quarter the size office because most of their employees will be working from home on a laptop.
But wouldn't that mean that somebody working in the West End of London could actually be paying less or the same income, local income tax, as somebody working out on the marshes in Kent where we're trying to encourage new growth?
It's very difficult. Yes, I mean.
Yes is the answer.
No. The answer is getting a fair form of tax is incredibly difficult.
Well,
and everybody has their own definition of fair.
Yeah, and any tax system always has winners and losers.
Absolutely.
On this particular situation, it seems there are potentially there are some winners, but there are also a fairly sizable proportion of losers.
You were almost going to say there are. You know, the fact is there are lots and lots of more winners than losers. But I don't. If you're a loser, it doesn't matter how many winners there are, does it?
Absolutely.
So if you're a business that's struggling, I think I absolutely get that, and I think what we've got to see is what the government do about it, and I hope they will.
I think what we ought to remember though is that the government are. You talked about an own goal. I mean, fancy charging hospitals more in business rates. I mean, where's that going to get us? We all know that the hospital and the NHS is broke. So charging them more in business rates makes no sense whatsoever.
So, Jeremy, what would you like to see in next week's statement about the business rates?
Well, personally, I'd like to see it. There ought to be something based upon the size and growth potential of businesses, and also regional. I think local authorities can be trusted to make more decisions about intervening where business rates are crippling a local business. At the moment, we can do that, but we have to pay all of it, like with rates. If we can levy lower council tax on things, for example, but we have to pay it all. That's nonsense. The government, I think, ought to be listening to local authorities about growth areas and what we can do, perhaps setting up a fund for authorities to implement. It is a very difficult area.
Because there are plans, aren't there, for local authorities to be permitted to cut business rates in certain areas?
Well, of course, the other thing we haven't talked about, of course, is that in the future, you talk about abolishing something like business rates. That's meant to be the big plank of how our local government's going to be funded in the future. So,
yes, but we're not going to get any more money.
I'm sure that's the case, and in a place like Dartford, for example, where we've got high growth and lots of businesses, not just Blue Water and places like that, but regional businesses, but lots of other businesses, very high growth area, low unemployment. We should have nothing to fear from a system that says we'll fund you from business rates, but we think the government might tinker around and set a floor which makes life difficult.
I mean, the problem is when governments are confronted with these problems and they want to see off a revolt, they'll come up with some temporary measure.
Yeah.
Theresa May is not going to announce a full-scale review of the business rate system on.
Well, I hope she will.
Well,
she should.
She should. And what should she say about it then?
Well, a full-scale review is a full-scale review. You don't preempt what that review is going to determine.
But that doesn't do anything for these businesses this year who are going to get bills on the.
Well, this is where the administration of the transition fund is critical, and yet we don't want businesses, being destroyed overnight, because they're having to deal with 100% hike in
the Liberal policy is to destroy them over a longer period of time, isn't it?
No, the Liberal policy is not to destroy business. We want to.
Well, yeah, Jeremy's got a point. What is the Liberal Democrat proposal for business rates?
As I've said, I would like to see a local income tax, a local tax
covering all
for businesses,
covering the council tax as well, or just.
Well, we've always said that council tax should be replaced by local income tax, and I see no reason why business shouldn't be approached on a similar manner.
There was an old joke, Paul, about the Labour Party's policy on small businesses, which was to start with a big one. That was it.
Right. Yeah, well, let's not go down that one.
Okay, all right. Well,
they're not here to defend themselves.
This is clearly an issue which is going to continue at least until Theresa May announces a U-turn next week. Now. 4 years ago, the fight for control of Kent County Council nearly saw one of the biggest upsets when a surge from UKIP nearly deprived the Conservatives of outright control. 4 years on, with UKIP appearing to tear itself apart and Labour's woes continuing under Jeremy Corbyn, can the Liberal Democrats exploit the situation? Here's Andrew South.
Eyes will be focused on Kent County Council headquarters in Maidstone on May the 5th, when the results of the 2017 county election will be formally announced. Much has happened in politics since the last election in 2013, so how will this affect voters this year, assuming that they are aware that it's happening? Did you know that there's an election coming up this year?
No, I didn't.
It's the Kent County elections. Does that mean anything to you?
I don't quite understand what that sort of concerns, like what that is, or.
I actually work for KCC, but I didn't. I didn't know it was coming up. But
UKIP surprised us all in the 2013 elections by winning 17 of the 83 council seats outright, having only previously held one.
I think it was actually a huge surprise for the party, and we weren't necessarily prepared for that success. Since then, we've rallied the troops and we've done quite well, and our success continues, which is a lovely thing to have the support of Romney Marsh people, and now we need to deliver some results.
While more than half of the map remained swathed in blue, UKIP strongholds Thanet and Shepway, including Romney Marsh, destroyed the opposition with little evidence of the Reds making any mark in Kent. So has UKIP's job been done? The image of beer swiller and smoker Nigel Farage certainly appealed to the working class then, but how will the party perform this time round with their new leader Paul Nuttall, who has clearly had a few embarrassing public mishaps since he took over? So while there may be many issues in the mix for voters to consider on May the 4th, one thing is for certain: with the value of the pound falling, the cost of living on the rise, then whoever takes power in Kent will certainly have their work cut out. Andrew South, KMTV, Maidstone.
Well, Rob Bird, Liberal Democrats had a bit of a torrid time back in 2013 and the preceding election, 2010. What are your grounds for optimism this time?
Well, let's be clear. 2013 here in Kent, we retained 7 seats. I mean, we actually so we were no worse.
7 out of 84.
7 out of 4, which is where we were before the election.
Hardly a sign of a party on resurgence party.
I fully
You'll
accept
qualify
that.
for rate relief at that rate.
Thank you very much. No, I think the Liberal Democrats have had a difficult time during the coalition. Yes, we paid the price for moderating some of the more extreme Tory policies, but we've put that behind us, and we've had a very strong run of local authority by-elections in the last 9 months.
And of course you won that parliamentary by-election.
We won a parliament.
But the point there was that was a very pro-European constituency. And if you look at the Kent map, only one area of Kent voted to remain in the EU. That was Tunbridge Wells. All the others were against it.
Which is true, but we have won we have won local authority elections in the last few months in Sunderland, Rotherham, Kettering, places which have had strong Leave votes. People actually do vote for the Lib Dems, regardless of their attitudes to Europe.
Is Norman Tebbit right when he says that the Lib Dems are feasting on the corpse of Labour?
Well, maybe we are, because I haven't seen very much enthusiasm for Labour across the country.
Well, we can perhaps hear a little bit from Labour. I think we've got a short clip with the leader of the Labour Party, Gordon Cowan, to indicate his views.
Yeah, we certainly are more optimistic. I mean, 4 years ago, we did hope to get around that 21, 22 seats, and we ended up with 13, which was far greater than the other, but still disappointing. But this time round, we are hoping and aiming for that 21, 22 seats, and we believe that we've got the ability to gain those seats as well.
Well, Jeremy Kite, there's Gordon Cowan, your fellow county councillor, talking about how optimistic Labour is about getting 20-odd seats. Now, the danger for you has been UKIP, but in a sense, they're kind of, after their surge in 2013, they've lost a bit of ground. Do you see them as a threat or not?
I actually think when it comes to county council elections, it shouldn't be about threats, really. It's about record and about responsibility.
Oh, come on.
Everyone
says that.
No. What is it? I mean, we wouldn't have said before the last election that UKIP were going to be a threat in Thanet. We don't know where a threat might come from. I actually think there are people who are very strong pro-European of all parties who are now thinking, blimey, the country's made a terrible, terrible mistake, I must go out and vote Liberal. And they might do that for a bit. It doesn't change anything. It doesn't certainly unwind the Brexit debate. And so actually, I think what the County Council, the Kent County Council elections will mean will be the Conservatives, I suspect, will be fighting very hard on here's how we run a common sense council. There are bits of it you really like, there are bits of it you don't like, there are bits of it you think could be improved.
And ask people to vote for more austerity.
Well, listen, it's about the services and whether they feel the services are actually...
About cutting services.
Well, it isn't cutting services, is it?
Yes,
it's about delivering services at a proper rate.
No,
I think,
even Paul Carter and John Simmons are admitting that we've got a high-risk budget this year, or in this coming year, with cuts to services which are unpalatable.
If we assume you're right, Bob, and I think you're wrong, Bob, but if we assume you're right, frankly, it doesn't really matter who runs a council then, does it? Because you'll still be cutting. If it's an austerity issue, a national austerity issue, what are you going to do? Set up a currency printing plant? What are you going to do? Where's that money going to come from?
Hold on a minute, Jeremy. You say that, but there are other authorities like Surrey who have blown the cover on this, and some people make the point that if you can cope with this level of cuts without impacting savings, that's not really credible to say that, even though you're saying that there's no cuts to frontline services.
I think the electorate in Britain are more sophisticated than the media sometimes give them credit for, and I think they do understand if you go on spending as Labour did, sooner or later the country will kind of run out of money. Parties that have got a more moderate stance will have to then deal with that when they come into office, and you've got to put it right. It's about cleaning up after a party. The Conservatives have done it all through history.
But it was clear back in 2010 and in the 2 or 3 years after that we had to do some tidying up after Labour. But to continue this austerity programme for another 2, 3, 4, 5 years, how long? I mean, we've now been told government departments are planning for another 6% cut.
There's a fair point in it, and a lot of Conservative councillors will tell you, when you speak to them off the record or privately, that they think the government's shortchanged them very, very badly, and not just given them a few cuts to make, but over years and years have cut back their budgets in a way which makes the delivery of the same level of services not viable.
I think local government has been treated badly, because I think an awful lot of efficiency is there, an awful lot of the savings, the common sense savings were made there. I'm not sure any government has actually given us credit for that. When they ask about things from central government about how we should behave, it very rarely is the way they themselves behave in government.
Rob's saying it's just a vote Conservative, you're voting for more austerity, basically.
Well, quite frankly, the austerity is really there. The money that comes from government is really the money that comes from government.
It's still reducing.
So so let's imagine in that terrible day we wake up on May the 5th, and it's a combination, it's a coalition between Liberal Democrats and UKIP running Kent.
No,
what is going to change?
What is
going to change?
That is really not likely, as you well know, Jeremy.
What is going to change? You're not going to be able to print any more money.
Put yourself in this glorious position where you've won on May the 4th or May the 5th, and what's your first set of proposals going to be, Rob Bird?
I think the first thing I'll do is ring up David Hodge and find out how he got such a good deal for Surrey out of the government.
That's David Hodge, the leader of Surrey County Council.
Well, we don't actually, to be fair, we don't know he's got a great deal. There's a lot of speculation. It was a very good comic moment when I think people thought he got a good deal. We don't know what he's got yet. But the truth is often...
Yes, no, he's showing the truth of the situation, isn't he? He's saying, there's no point pussyfooting around this. We're in bad trouble, and it's the government's fault.
Yeah,
that's why we're proposing a 15%.
Well, what I can say about the services, come back to services, Martin Vye, who's a very, very good Liberal Democrat councillor, he's packing it in this year, so he's got no reason, no axe to grind to carry on.
I've got a feeling I know what you're going to say.
At the last meeting, you heard him say what everyone else heard him say, which is that I want to talk about education. I must say, the education in Kent is, I've never seen it any better than it is at the moment. And that's what he said. So it is about delivering the best you can from what you have. I think it's okay. I don't accuse my friend here of this, but I think when you look at Labour and when you look at UKIP, they can certainly carry a placard, they certainly carry a grudge, they can't carry responsibility. And when you're running a council, you've got to do the best you can. And actually I found that the Liberal Democrats at County Council have been good partners in terms of actually helping us and understanding where we are. But coming to actually choosing who runs the council, it's got to be about responsibility, and it's got to be about common sense delivery of where we are. And I think actually the Tories have done very well.
Common sense delivery, savings which have not impacted frontline services, that sounds like utopia, doesn't it, in local government?
Well, it does sound like utopia, and you go around housing estates, and I'm not talking about the most deprived areas, I'm talking about regular housing estates, elderly people, they get next to no social care, they're stuck in their homes, no bus services, there are so many cuts these days. And people are literally dying of loneliness.
This election, as in previous elections, the Lib Dems have done well in Maidstone and Tunbridge and Malling, but haven't really expanded their reach beyond that. How are you going to tackle that?
It's a challenge, but I think we may spring a few surprises come May. We've got one or two.
Are you going to share these surprises with us?
No, because they wouldn't be a surprise.
Where are you targeting?
I'm sure you'll find out in the next few months.
Are you going to challenge the UKIP hegemony down in Thanet, or are you?
I think the UKIP group are doing a wonderful job of challenging each other down in Thanet, and we'll let them get on with it.
Can you just give me 3 policies that you would actually change then at the county council today? If you were in, you talk about how the things are going, all the terrible cuts. What would you do differently? Just three big headline things. What would you do differently?
We would look at housing completely differtly.
Well, that's not actually a Kent function.
Well, it is really, because we do have a strategic oversight for growth.
So you'd stop growth or increase growth?
I would want to maintain growth, but I don't think stuffing it...
So there's an area where Kent isn't responsible, and what you do is you'd maintain things.
But stuffing it into already congested, built-up areas...
Right. So you spread it around.
Well, I think there's a point here.
Spread it around.
I better take back my position as chief questioner.
Sorry.
But I think the point here is that this intensive development we're seeing in places like Maidstone creates pressure on County Council in terms of infrastructure needs, demand for school places, etc.
But part of that pressure is caused by the County Council. I mean, in my part of Maidstone, Maidstone Central, which covers most of West Maidstone, the Kent County Council has never once objected to any development. They say you can keep developing, you can keep building here. We're not worried about the congestion. No. We're not worried about the impact on services.
That clearly isn't what. That's a huge misrepresentation of the way the planning system works. Well, to say that council isn't worried about it.
Let's not get a detour into planning. We're up against the clock. Just quickly, Jeremy, it would be bad for democracy if you returned a huge majority like you did have in 2010.
Well, we have great colleagues all around the county who I think would do a very good job at the county council. You do need an effective opposition, and the electorate will decide that. That's the glory of it. They will decide where it comes from. But I mean, I'm working with many of those candidates now, and I tell you that I think this is probably the best intake I've seen, potential intake I've seen, and I think they run a very, very good council. I would like to see a rolling back of UKIP, because I'm not sure. I don't think they've been that effective, to be honest. I don't think they've made a big enough difference. They talk about this radical party stuff. They're actually in the chamber. They're not very radical. They're messing around with small amounts of money.
I have to say I agree with Jeremy. I really do wonder what UKIP are doing at
Well,
County Hall.
we've ended with a degree of consensus, which is always something to welcome. As ever, the clock's against us. That's all from us here at Paul on Politics. Thanks very much to our guests for coming into the studio. We'll be back soon. In the meantime, you can catch up on all the latest political news in Kent by logging on to kentonline.co.uk or listening to KMFM or following me on Twitter at Paul on Politics. Thanks for watching.